Welcome to Psychology 1. We're looking at motivation. This is part 1 of the chapter, Motivation and Emotions. With the crowd chanting his name, Crosby, Crosby, a gold medal was slipped over Sidney Crosby's head and came to rest comfortably on his chest. Now, this was a fitting moment for the talented young hockey player from Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, who scored the game-winning overtime goal against the Americans men's and Canadian men's Olympic hockey team. And most of Canada erupted into the frenzy of emotion, just like Paul Henderson's goal of the century against the Russians in 1972. And I remember that clearly. I was in grade 8, and they closed the school down for classes and allowed us to sit in the gymnasium with a couple of TVs, black and white TVs, to sit and watch that game. And I remember it very clearly, as many of you may remember Sidney Crosby goal. Crosby goal will be remembered for many years to come by young and old hockey fans alike. The 2010 Olympics in Vancouver was a successful competition for many Canadian athletes, with the final medal count for Canada at that Games was 14 gold, 7 silver, and 5 bronze. The success of the Canadian athletes has been attributed to several things, including increased funding for training prior to the events, the location of the Games, it was in Canada, so it's an advantage, and the support from Canadian fans at the events, and cash incentives of up to $20,000 for each athlete who won gold medals. Now, for professional hockey players like Sidney Crosby, who makes nearly $8 million every year, what possible motivation could another $20,000 be? However, for a young Canadian athlete like John Montgomery, skeleton, that's a sled, gold medal winner, and a Georgian college graduate, who worked as a sales consultant and automobile auctioneer, $20,000 might be nearly half of his salary. External motivation factors such as many are only part of external motivation factors such as many are only part of each success story. External motivating factors such as the many are only part of each success story. Of the roughly 2,600 athletes who participated in the Winter Games, they all have in common an internal motivation, motivated intense desire to compete and win in their sport of choice. They all sacrifice years of their lives training both their minds and their bodies in order to compete at the Olympics. In fact, the internal motivations such as strong desire to win and a sense of obligation to one's country and supporters, often fueled by strong emotions, can be more powerful than the strongest external motivation. Underlying each gold medal athlete's story, from the successful professional hockey player to the amateur skater, is a mixture of strong internal motivations, supportive external motivations, and powerful emotions, which combined into a record-breaking victory. So this is part 1, and we're going to focus on motivation, theories of motivation, primary drives, and social motives. So let's get started. First, some definitions. Motivation: all of the processes that initiate, direct, and sustain behavior that will satisfy our physiological and psychological needs. And we're going to look at that a lot more as we get through the chapter. But so all the processes that initiate, get us started, direct, give us direction, and sustain, keep us at it, those are motivations. So think of your schoolwork. What gets you to sit down and get started at it? What directs what you need to do and getting it organized and sustaining it through to the end and completing it? That's all connected. There are connections to motivation. So what is motivating you or not motivating you? Motives are needs and desires that direct or energize our behavior toward a goal. As was mentioned in the intro, there are internal and external motivations. Intrinsic, or the internal motivations, are incentives motivated without external rewards. They are done for the joy of doing them. Intrinsic, when motives are internal and they push us to act. If I just love doing, like for example, my videos that I make, I love doing post editing. And I love making them, so I'm motivated. It's not hard to get me to do that. And I will stick with it. It takes me between 6 and 8 hours to do one video, and I love doing it, and I'm motivated to do it. No extrinsic, my pay isn't what's motivating me. Now, external or extrinsic motivation are activities that are motivated by the pleasant or unpleasant consequences that follow them. Extrinsic, when motives are external or outside of us, we call them incentives, and they can pull or entice us to act. Now, in our field of motivation, there are instinct theories of motivation. Now, instinct theories suggest that human behavior is motivated by certain innate, unlearned tendencies or instincts that are shared by all individuals. Instinct theories were popular in the past. However, continued research has determined that human experiences is too complex and diverse to have everything tied to instinct. So we're going to review a couple. The drive reduction theory suggests that biological needs create an unpleasant state of arousal or tension called a drive. So when our body, for example, a simple example would be when you exhale, at some point you get an unpleasant state of I need air, and you inhale. That tension of I need air is drive, which you could say motivates me to inhale. It's become automatic, of course, and we're going to look at hunger and thirst, where when you get thirsty, that state of arousal of I'm really thirsty drives us or impels us to engage in the behavior that will satisfy the need and reduce the tension and return my body to homeostasis. So when I'm missing water and I get this unpleasant state, that I have a drive to go search out and seek some fluid, and I get water and I drink it, my body goes, oh, we're reducing that tension, we're returning back to homeostasis. Homeostasis is the tendency of our body to maintain a balanced internal state in order to promote physical survival. A disruption in homeostasis, hunger, thirst as example, provides a drive that motivates us to behave in a way that will restore balance, homeostasis. So we go eat or get a drink. Now, arousal theory suggests that the aim of motivation is to maintain an optimum level of arousal. Okay, now, if arousal is less than optimal, we engage in activities that stimulate arousal. If arousal exceeds the optimal level, we seek to reduce the stimulation. People vary greatly in the amount of arousal they can tolerate. And you can only imagine. You know that there's people who seem to need to jump off of high precipices or something in order just to get... And you wonder, how can they do that? Because when you stand to do something that they've done it pretty easily. The arousal level gets so high, you can't do it. So we all vary greatly. So for some people, the heightened level of arousal experienced when hanging off a precipice is almost enjoyable, where others prefer less arousing activities. So when arousal is too low, i.e. when you're bored, stimulus motives such as curiosity or activities will motivate us to find some means of increasing arousal. The Yerkes-Dodson law, it states that there are optimum levels of arousal for different tasks. Both insufficient and excessive arousals impairs performance. Performance on a task is best when arousal level is appropriate to the difficulty of the task. Simple tasks are performed with high level of arousal. Moderate tasks are performed best with moderate levels of arousal, and difficult tasks are performed best with lower levels of arousal. Alternatively, we can look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs arranges needs in order of urgency, from the physical needs down below, this is food, water, air, shelter, to security needs, to belonging needs, to esteem needs, and finally to self-actualized needs, which are developing to one's full potential at the top of the hierarchy. Now, theoretically, the needs at the lower levels must be satisfied adequately before the person gets motivated to fulfill higher needs. So if you look at the bottom need and you think of a person who's homeless, their motivation is to meet these needs. If they can't meet them, every day that's their motive. They don't get up here. But for those of us who have had other advantages in life, and maybe we don't worry about some of these basic needs, these have been taken care of, we can start achieving these other needs as we move up the hierarchy of needs. So I've mentioned about drives earlier, so let's look at a primary drive. Now, primary drives are unlearned. They arise from the tension that is created by the unmet biological need. And the two that we sort of started with is hunger and thirst. And we're going to start with thirst. Thirst is a basic biological drive, and there's two types of thirst signal to us to drink. One is extracellular, outside cellular. These thirst results from a loss of water from our body tissues that can be caused by perspiration, vomiting, bleeding, diarrhea, or excessive intake of alcohol. All of these things take water away from the cells. The intracellular thirst results from a loss of water from inside the body and is caused by disturbances of water sodium balance can impact that a whole lot. And so those drives were motivated on either side, extracellular and intracellular, both will motivate us to drink. Now for hunger, let's consider the role of the hypothalamus and hunger. The lateral hypothalamus, LH, acts as a feeding center. When activated, it signals to us to start eating. When it's destroyed, the animal we just don't eat. The ventromedial hypothalamus evidently acts as a satiety center that tells us when we're not hungry anymore. And when it's activated, it signals to us to stop eating. When it's destroyed, we just overeat and become obese. There's a disorder that's known as Prader-Willi syndrome. And the Prader-Willi syndrome is essentially not having an active ventromedial hypothalamus. The person never knows and never gets a signal that they're full. And so they will eat and eat and eat. They have to have their environment strictly controlled because they don't have any indicator to stop eating. Some biologically driven hunger cues are fullness of the stomach. This is the fuller the stomach, the less hungry we are. Increased secretion of insulin. Hunger is stimulated when the brain receives the message that blood glucose levels are low. When blood glucose levels are high, insulin is released and acts to convert the glucose to energy. Elevations in insulin cause the increase in hunger, in food intake, and in the desire for sweets. Absence of the satiety signals, for example, cholecystokinin, sorry about stumbling over that, CCK, that is secreted by the gastrointestinal tract during digestion. Without external eating cues such as taste, smell, and appearance of food, the variety of food offered and the time of the day can cause people to eat more food than they actually need. The social components of hunger include social cues as to when meals are to be eaten, the cultural customs and food preferences, and the use of food as a comfort device or escape from unpleasantness. Now, for some people may be externals who respond to the anticipation of eating by producing insulin response, increasing the risk of obesity. Now you'll see in figure 9.3 a summary for factors that inhibit and stimulate eating. You might find that useful and helpful. Now, hunger and weight fluctuations are connected, and many of us have experienced with food and weight, the good and the bad. Variations in body weight are influenced by heredity. Genetics can determine our metabolic rate, number of fat cells, and set point. Mutations of the gene that controls metabolic rate, the rate in which the body burns calories to produce energy. The lower our metabolic rate, the less our body burns calories, and we are more likely to gain weight. Our activity level can certainly affect that. Increasing our activity level will lower our set point so that we can store less fat. The number of cells or fat cells that we have, the greater the number of fat cells, the more likely someone is to have higher weight gains. And of course, eating habits. What we eat will contribute to whether we gain or lose. Now, according to fat cell theory, fatness is related to the number of fat cells in our body. Normal weight individuals have between 25 and 35 billion fat cells, whereas individuals whose weight is twice the normal have between something like 100 to 125 billion fat cells. The number of fat cells is determined by genetics and our eating habits. These cells act as storehouses for liquefied fat. When we lose weight, we do not lose fat cells. We lose the fat inside the cells. This is the fat cells. This is the fat cells shrinking that what happened when we overeat, such that our fat cells reach their capacity, the number of fat cells increase. The set point theory suggests that we are genetically pre-programmed to carry a certain amount of body weight. The set point is affected by the number of fat cells in the body and by metabolic rate. According to this theory, the internal homeostatic system functions to maintain body weight by adjusting appetite and metabolic rate according to that genetic set point. Now, there are other motives. Now, these we've just been touching on have been more biological motives. We'll look at social motives, because these are ones that often affect us most notably when it comes to our everyday life. Social motives are learned or acquired through social and cultural experiences. Some examples include the need to be with other people, the need for power, the need for achievement. Murray defined the list of social motives as achievement, recognition, dominance, and order. Our highest aspirations, the professions we choose, the partners we are drawn to, and the methods we use to achieve our sense of importance result primarily from our social motives. Our social motives then determine and drives us towards our goals. So social motives become very important in achieving goal. The need for achievement is the need to accomplish something difficult and to perform at a high standard of excellence. We approach any situation with hope for success and fear of failure. Motivation to avoid failure can cause us to work harder, or it can cause us to avoid it altogether. Whether we strive for a goal depends on the strength of our needs to achieve, our expectations of success, and the incentives value of success and failure. That is, how much you value succeeding at the activity and how distressed you would be if you failed. You might want to check out the try it, test your need for achievement in your text, just for fun. People in high achievement motivation enjoy challenges and like to compete. They tend to set goals of moderate difficulty, are more motivated by hope of success than they are about fear of failure, and they attribute their success to their ability, their hard work, and most often drawn to business and frequently become entrepreneurs. So social motives are really important, and getting a handle on how we can use motivation to benefit us and to use it to achieve goals and achieve our outcomes is very important. I hope this has been helpful. This is part 1 on motivation and emotion by looking at motivation. Next video for next week will be on emotion. Thank you, everybody, and good luck.